Hello everybody, my name is Daisy Rain Martin. This is my friend Janelle Stauffer. We are here to talk about a book that I'm writing called Monsters Under the Bed. The subtitle is Practical Steps to Keeping Your Child Safe from Sexual Predators. And the reason that I invited my very good friend Janelle today is because she is a licensed clinical
That's right, social worker.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, when we're just friends, it's just you're
Right,
Janelle to me.
Yeah.
You're Janelle to me, and but she does such great hope-giving work in the community. She specializes in trauma and attachment. You have your own private practice.
That's right. Yeah.
And I am so grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I wanted there are a couple of people that I'm going to interview in addition to you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a detective that his job is to investigate sexual assaults on children. There is a very forward-thinking pastor that I am also interviewing, and just takes a very, where the church traditionally has sort of swept these situations under the rug. He's not like that. And then I also would like to interview someone from the Family Justice Center, because there are so many resources available for people who have had to go through child sexual abuse in their families, whether personally or by someone, with someone that they know. So first of all, thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be doing this, and I'm glad that you are writing a book as a resource to people going through this.
Well, we have a certain Jessie Horney to thank for that, and we're probably going to get an interview out of her as well. So can we just start by asking a couple of just questions I think that every parent, when they have a baby, you know this. You have two. I have one, and they are the most precious things to us. And we don't want our children or anyone's children to be at risk. And I do feel like, in all the years I've been doing advocacy work, I feel like there have been, I've known children that a predator will pass on those children if they think that they will find their voice and advocate for themselves. But I want to ask you, and you're coming from this as a therapist, as a professional, what kids do you feel are most at risk?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Actually, in my biz, there is actually good conversations about what we call trauma-proofing kids. And basically that's about looking at the science or looking at statistics and finding out what factors are present that seem to protect kids. And so maybe I could answer it from that place.
That would be
first.
great. Yeah.
There are a couple items that really protect kids. One is a secure attachment with their parents. So they know that their parents are there and there's a safety net.
Right.
But that's not enough. They are able to talk about emotions openly.
Okay.
They understand their personal boundaries, and those kids. They walk around and that they understand their boundaries.
Yes,
right?
I've been in public
out.
education for 26 years, and I do know those children.
Yeah,
yes,
and
yes.
so perpetrators typically are intimidated by that and will not. They're not going to. It's not even an option to move forward on that. So the opposite of that is someone that's more vulnerable to sexual abuse. Someone who isn't understanding their boundaries, doesn't own that space for whatever reason. So that's one thing. The other one is, kids are very vulnerable to it if they are around situations that could create it. For example, if there's a history of sexual abuse in a family, those kids are more likely to get victimized than kids who are not. So that's a factor for sure. And then parent factors like, are they supervised?
Right.
Are parents actively involved? Kids whose parents are actively involved are less likely to be sexually.
Well, it makes me think of, and I've written about this, that in the wild, antelope on the Serengeti, they will surround their young, they're sick. They will not let their young ones be isolated, because predators are out there. Like, they understand it.
Right.
They don't have to get Congress to pass laws about statutes of limitations and things like. They don't have to do that. They protect their children.
Yeah, it's instinctual.
It's instinctual.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
And, I mean, truthfully, that's in us too. So there's a lot of like this desire to protect in us that if we were allowed to trust it and pay attention, we probably would do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my goodness. One thing that I want to write about in Monsters Under the Bed is a child's autonomy over their own bodies. And I know that you have studied, and I've studied child development too, being a teacher, but you also in your line of work. So I would like you to talk about why it's important that in a child's development that they be permitted to have that autonomy over their own bodies.
Yeah, I think that is it's such an important conversation to have. I mean, just as I mentioned just a second ago, one of the protective factors in kids, that they carry around with some protection is a sense of autonomy or ownership of their boundaries. Right. And you can't come to understand that without respecting autonomy. It's all developmentally necessary to build upon that. So I think it's a really important one. And it's not just important actually for protection purposes. It's actually fundamental for developing their sense of self and healthy relationships in the future. So this is bigger than just protection against sexual abuse, but it's really important. So, from the very beginning, one of the very first developmental stages, we've got the first stage that we call trust versus mistrust, where kids are deciding whether or not the world's safe, which is really important. Well, right after that is this thing called autonomy. They have to learn it. That's the stage where kids are saying, no, it's mine, I do it, that kind of a thing. And the reason it starts so early is because it's absolutely necessary for every other stage of development. Right. So it's very important to create that space. In terms of, things that have to do with sexual violation, the idea of consent, which is, it's all over the place.
Yes,
we know that's a very important factor in what we're talking about. Well, the understanding of consent, even internally, can't happen until we've let our kids own their bodies, own their space, own the ability to say no, all of that. So it's a really important conversation from the very beginning. Right.
It makes me think of, and I write about this in the book, there's a very beautiful little sweet girl who is my heart, and she, her mom, we're not blood relatives, but she is my little biscuit. That's what I call my kids' food, and all the children in my life that I love and just want to be a part of their lives. So she went through a stage where she did not want hugs and she did not want kisses, and it was hard for her parents because it kind of makes parents feel badly that their child is rejecting someone that is a safe person. And so I didn't ever let them say, oh, go give me a kiss, and I said, don't ever do that. This is her choice. And it made sense to them. It really made sense to them. And as hard as it was, you don't ever say, oh, you're hurting Uncle Johnny's feelings, or you're hurting Aunt Lulu's feelings. Look at Aunt Lulu's gonna cry. Let Aunt Lulu cry.
Yeah.
They are grown adults.
Yeah, great. And
let it land where it lands, and the adults are the one who have to suck it up.
Right, yeah.
So the millisecond her little brother was born, and we cuddled all over him, we were fine. we could just cuddle the baby, and instantly she was ready for hugs and kisses again, but it was all on her terms. And now I just scoop her up, and it's fine, and I think that's just super important.
Yeah, it is, and it really she needs to. I mean, in that moment where she was given it was okay for her. It's like the praise is, she's doing it. She's figuring out her own space. She gets to decide.
She gets to decide.
On that note, one thing, when I'm sitting with, a lot of the work I do is with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and so we're working through a lot of their stuff as adults. And one of the things that many of them will spend grieving about for a very long time is that as a child they didn't learn how to set this boundary, or that it was their space.
Right.
And they feel, one, sad, but they also feel angry because they almost were set up.
Right.
Now when they've had to go through an instance, now we're having to process of sexual abuse, they're saying, why didn't I ever learn that I could say no, or that I could have, I didn't need to just make them happy by whatever happened, whatever factors.
By sacrificing any part of myself.
Yeah, and it's a huge part of their healing, and so I think we should listen to that.
Yes, I agree. So as parents, what should we be communicating to our children about child sexual abuse, and at what age?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one of the most important things kids need to know above all else is that their space is safe. In order for kids to grow, they need to know they're safe. So it's an important line to understand when communicating, that this is a safe conversation,
right,
and not an off-limits conversation, but it's also your safe conversation in the midst of it. When we talk about fire safety,
right,
we take it pretty seriously in our culture.
Yes, we do.
Right? But we go up and we talk about it very factually. We bring in like coloring books and just talk about it. It's my opinion that when we're talking about anything sexually related, that it's the same kind of conversation.
Right.
Because this has to do about sex in our culture, that's like an off-limits conversation, and so it makes it not, an easy conversation.
Right.
Parents are uneasy, but if we can have this conversation just calmly and whatever, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Right.
The age of being communicated, honestly, if we're talking about bodies and ownership from, say, toddler on, we can be talking about protection from unsafe touch from that moment on too.
Right.
But it is really important to know that when we're having these conversations, that we could create increased anxiety in our kids and undue amounts of stress.
Right.
And so we have to be sure we're okay ourselves in communicating it. Just like a dinner table conversation.
Right. You think about how gargantuan the Me Too movement is, and I don't think we even know now how many members of the Me Too movement there are. And you think about all of those people who have children who have unresolved issues, who still struggle with pain and anxiety, and even addictions or patterns in their lives that are very, very unhealthy, and they love their children so much, but they haven't had that healing themselves. And that's why I love therapy.
Yeah,
I love
just cannot emphasize it enough. One of the things I study too is attachment, which is about the relationship between caregivers and their kids. And that unworked through stuff trickles down to kids, even if we don't know it.
Right.
And it's workable. I mean, you can still be a great parent with that, and it's important to go and do your own work so that you can be calm when you're having this conversation.
And honestly, children are just designed to love you.
Yeah.
That's how they're made.
That's right.
And unfortunately, that is the very sacred thing that predators will take advantage of. They will use that like a tool to ingratiate themselves to a child.
Process.
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that in a second. One thing I was thinking about is how should situations be handled, whether it's in your own family or friends of the family, when it's kids hurting kids. I think that gets sticky.
Yeah, it is. It is really sticky. We look at it completely different in the therapy realm, depending. So there's a couple really important distinctions. One would be to determine whether or not it's experimentation that is within we call it healthy range, meaning they experimented on one another, and it's a great opportunity to learn boundaries. But it doesn't mean just when experimentation, it doesn't have to be traumatic. If it's that, it does require intervention and communication, but that in and of itself is not traumatic for these reasons. One, it didn't include power,
Right.
or in that way. And two, it would more likely lead to confusion than it would a traumatic state. So it still needs to be addressed for that reason. But
So something that comes out of curiosity.
right,
Let's
yeah,
say.
a good example. I was in a group of just peers once, and a woman said, I walked into the room, and my son, I think he was 6, and his friend had their underwear down, and they were playing with their penises, and they called them swords, and they were playing around with each other. That is not, they were not perpetrating on one another. They were exploring something, and so that, she freaked out because she wasn't sure what to do. So that made it more traumatic.
Right.
But
And maybe shameful.
yeah, right. So that's when
Right.
it became hard. And so there's some, need to kind of understand that.
Right.
But it does sometimes cross over into where it's molestation or perpetrating. And in those cases, I really think that a therapist is the only way, is one of the best, I think the best way to intervene on that, because of if it's in a family system or among friends, there's so many emotions and stuff
Right.
involved that you need a professional.
You
to
need
come in
an
and help.
objective third
Yeah.
party.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Could you talk to us a little bit about when it becomes more than curiosity, more than experimentation, where there's a power differential? Let's say maybe an age difference or a size difference, a maturity difference, and then things become much less innocent. And then how would families deal with that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one. And I really still think, and I really believe you should bring a therapist in to help guide the process, because and you should probably, get involved in the protection process, whatever is necessary to keep that from happening, to stop all future abuse from happening. And so that could mean police involvement, and probably should.
Yes.
And I think for the healing of the family, there's a lot of little processes that come up when the police are involved, that if you have a therapist on hand, can help with the emotional process through that. So that's one of the hardest things later when working through trauma later, is what happened directly after. And so bringing a therapist on hand immediately to help figure out how to communicate things and how to work through that, I think is the most important thing to do.
When you say that not only is the event itself traumatizing for the victim, but also what occurs immediately after, it's, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I could really get on a soapbox for a very long time about this.
I can, is there room up there for me? Because I can join you in that. I don't know how many organizations there that have to prove to us that the more you try to sweep this under the carpet, the more damage is done for the victim.
Yeah, we're talking about years of healing difference. If someone were to come into me after a traumatic event and directly after, and have gone through, not had anything, the response be optimal, let's say, not doesn't have to be perfect, but optimal, that we could probably work through that trauma, depending on the severity and what else was coming in less than 6 months. But if you bring in a trauma that then includes not being believed, or some factors of intimidation, or anything that basically the way that it mostly is done right now, that then we've now turned that traumatic healing experience into years.
Yes.
And it makes all the difference in the world how we treat it afterwards. Things like how we interview, if whether or not somebody's believed or not. Unfortunately, many victims are disbelieved or are blamed. Straight up blamed. Yeah, the number of stories related, and that becomes actually more traumatic than the original event.
Absolutely. The betrayal of the event, of the assault, the betrayal of not being able to have a voice and be believed, and then on top of that is just insult to injury. It's trauma upon trauma to then be blamed, or I think just as harmful is to be believed and to be told to shut it.
Yeah.
Shut it down.
Yep.
Yeah, I do believe you, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm not coming to your rescue,
Yeah.
and I'm complicit with
Yeah.
what is happening to
Yeah,
me.
you know what happens psychologically through that? That's actually the why it's so sad to see. It's more than just not being believed. When we go through a traumatic event, when we're rendered helpless in something, it opens up this process of, it's a survival mechanism to take in all the data and start storing it in belief form. And we need it for some reason, you know, for some things. If we're getting chased by a bear, I need to remember certain things to keep me safe from being chased by a bear in the future, right?
Right.
Well, same thing's happening when you're being perpetrated on or being sexually abused. You start to open up certain things like, I'm unsafe. So,
Right.
And you need to believe that so that you can be more vigilant to be safe. Well,
Right.
that's already open. That's going on after you've been through something traumatic.
Right.
Then somebody who could protect or could comes in and doesn't, then it gets internalized as something like, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable,
Right.
I'm not worthy of being protected. It almost never turns around and is anger, which eventually does when you go through therapy.
Sure.
Like, I'm mad they didn't protect me.
Right.
But the first thing that happens when you're in that vulnerable state is an internalization, and that's what makes it so sad, and that's what keeps
Right.
this. Then you walk around with that for a long time. That's what makes it
That's
take
exactly
years
right.
to work through.
And so on where I am in my life with being an educator, we have children that will not produce work, and it doesn't matter who says what. They are not interested in writing. They're not interested in math, science. We have that. We also have children who seem intent on self-sabotage, and may even try to sabotage even what's going on around them. Children that some would call incorrigible. I wouldn't, because I think, and I don't know if this is right, I'm not a therapist, but I say things like, what's going on? You know, are you okay? Is there something else? And I just flat out ask it, and I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not.
Well, it works for you.
It
You
has
have great success.
worked
But
for
from
me.
a therapy
you know,
perspective, that's just the truth. Nothing kids or any of us really do comes from a non-purposeful place. You know, there's always something under it. And
there's a reason.
yeah, and if we can get to that.
If I've got kids that are flipping me off and cussing me out, I really am not offended by that. I don't know if that's just 26 years in the industry and I've seen so much, but it makes me go, what's the matter?
Yeah, he must be struggling.
You-
Yeah, something's up.
I'm a likable person. I like you. I thought you were great, and I thought you thought I was great, and now you're having a come apart. Is it because I'm the trusted one? Are my shoulders that big that you can have a come apart on me?
Yeah.
And that might be it.
Yeah,
So,
that's,
yeah, so much to talk about. We could have just a whole series of interviews on just that alone.
totally. We
Are
absolutely.
you going to write a book at some point?
I'm sure. I don't have enough time.
Right now, nor do I. But
Right,
here I am.
I guess I should be
I know.
inspired. But a book does need to be
It
written
does.
about this stuff.
Yeah,
it's truth.
It's so amazing. What does appropriate vigilance look like? My first chapter in this book is called "Yeah, I'm the Crazy Mom." That's my first chapter. My child is 28 years old, and I'm done. That was it. I had one shot, and so the crazy things that I did, I mean, it's all in the rear view. And I don't even know if that's why I want you to and other experts to really kind of give parents a gauge of what it does appropriate vigilance look like, because I don't really know that I'm the expert on that, and I don't really get any more chances to do that. So
You have some good stuff. Yeah. I think that's a really great question. Appropriate vigilance, I think, is proactive and starts at birth. then there's this what we were talking about earlier of factors that sort of increase the protective factors in your kids.
Yeah.
Are all have to do with being that kind of mom, so
Right.
or parent, and appropriate vigilance then means having a secure attachment with your kiddo, first of all, which just means you're good enough. You don't have to be perfect. That's what we call it.
Right.
But beyond that, it's having conversations about bodies from the very beginning. And really, I really believe this in my business. It's unclear whether or not you should call it what it is or not, as long as you're calling it something. I really believe we just put no shame around the body.
Right.
And we just call the body what it is, from the elbow to the vulva. That those are open conversations. Right. And I think that's a healthy vigilance. Another healthy vigilance is having plans in place that protect kids. For example, with my own children, we have a code word that anyone who's supposed to pick them up, that's not me, that we didn't communicate, they need to know the passwords, and there's 3 of them. Right. So they ask that person a question, and that person needs to answer right to know that they are a safe person. And of course, they've never even had to use it, but it's my kids know that something's in place for that. But things like that across that this is an open conversation, and you start it from the beginning. Good vigilance also looks like teaching our kids to trust their own fear detection system. We actually think, we are born, and all mammals are, but we are all born with these circuits in our brain that will come in alert when we're at risk.
Right.
At birth, babies get activated when they hear a growly noise, and that's part of it. But then we learn some of the things over time. And if we were to teach our kids to trust that, and run away when it doesn't feel right, or go ask for help when it doesn't feel right, that's another vigilance. Right.
But you know what? We have children that, if a child comes and says, he's touching me, stop tattling, shut down, shut down, shut down. And then we wonder why they don't, if this is not bothering you. I could put my arms around you. You'd put your arms right back. It's not bothering you. And so we look at our children and we project onto them what would bother us or not bother us.
Yeah, that's right. So in that moment when they're coming and saying, this is my space, it's not working, we're saying, your space, stop. Your space doesn't matter.
That's exactly
that's
right.
Dangerous.
We shut them down and then wonder why they don't tell us. And that is one of the big, I think that is part of bullying, why bullying can be rampant, because kids don't tell, and when they do tell, they say, please don't tell anybody else. And and who should we see about that? I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't either.
And people say, well, you're going to encourage your kids to tattle. I don't think so. I don't think that's what that is.
Yeah, if there's any problems that I'd rather choose from,
I
would rather have too much tattling than not the other.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah, so I think, and that's a part of the healthy vigilance, part of the conversation. Another one is to be honest with your kids and vigilant about how you feel in situations and to communicate it. So, for example, just the other day, my daughter and I were in the car, and we're going to go refill some print cartridges. And, normally we'd get out and run right through. Well, I felt there was somebody in the parking lot that just didn't feel right. And I had, the situation didn't feel right.
Yep.
And it may have been totally safe, but it didn't feel exactly right. So I said that out loud to Hadley with a calm place. I said, this doesn't feel as safe as I like it to feel. And so we're gonna drive around for a little bit. And we'll come back when it feels safer. So I wasn't in the fight or flight mode. So it wasn't triggering to her, but it was a communication that says we have systems that tell us to pay attention. So I think that is.
Oh, love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, and then I think appropriate vigilance is then talking about sexual abuse when it's appropriate to do so, the same way we talk about fire safety or other things like that.
Right.
But there's some my kids call it, and me, nerdy therapist-y type things. But I think they're vigilance things, and that means We talk
I could
about
so
things.
see your daughters.
Yes. Oh, Jeanette moms.
Yeah, yes, I could so see that. They're beautiful people.
Yeah, they are.
They are beautiful people.
They are.
Oh my goodness. All right. So what's your opinion about sleepovers?
Yeah, so that's a hard one. I really believe that kids in elementary school don't need sleepovers. There isn't a social need that is met through sleepovers in an elementary school age. And in addition, after elementary school, there's some developmental tasks in place that can show you that your kids are ready for sleepovers.
Okay.
And I don't think in elementary school they're necessary. Now there's some fudgy lines there, like what if we go out of me and my husband, or go out of town and we leave them with grandparents, and so that's we should have that conversation too. But in terms of peer-to-peer sleepovers, I just don't think they're appropriate in elementary school. After that, with peer-to-peers, if kids are now demonstrating good boundaries, they're demonstrating this confidence, they've got those things in place that are basically trauma-proofing them, although nobody's exempt.
And that's what I am going to make very clear in this book.
Nobody is exempt.
These are practical steps to keeping your children safe from sexual predators. Nothing is 100%.
That's right. Yeah,
Nothing.
That's right.
Nothing.
Yeah, and so, but beyond that, if your kids are showing that these things and they're communicating, then you might be able to then to experiment with people you've met and know that there's no sexual abuse history. And of course, again, there's a lot you don't know, but sleepovers with good friends, that you're friends with their families as well and being involved, that might be more appropriate.
Right.
Otherwise, sleepovers might be low that necessary. Now then it does open up conversations about sleepovers with cousins, sleepovers with family members,
because
grandparents.
There are a lot of kids that my brother beats me up every day, or there's a lot of siblings and a lot of cousins or children are living together under the same roof, even from the same or different families. And I think even on the Darkness to Light website, they have statistics about how high the percentages are of kids victimizing other children, where there is that power differential, there's an age differential, a size, strength, all of that.
And so I think those are the factors to look for. Don't, if they're, for one, if there isn't someone there to supervise that you trust,
that's right,
then you probably won't do a sleepover.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
If there are factors in place like older siblings that you don't know, that we don't want to project our fears on anyone, but just don't put them in this situation. You probably don't want to do that.
Right.
And you know what I see a lot is that within families, even though there is a known, people know that sexual abuse is in their family, they'll still do sleepovers. And I would say that if you know that there is sexual abuse in your family, if it's ever been talked about, but even if there's hints of it, do not do a sleepover. This is how it gets passed down.
And since my first chapter is called I'm the Crazy Mom, my child wouldn't even know those people. I'm not trying to be ungracious, unmerciful, unforgiving, unchristlike, any of that. My child does not know my mother.
Yep.
My child does not know her husband, nor will he ever.
Yeah.
Nor will he ever. It's not an issue of unforgiveness. It is an issue of, and I'm not giving up on someone. I am taking 2 decades worth of evidence and applying them to this moment.
I just think it's true. It's hard to make that firm line, but when I've just seen it too much, that it just is too, that's like ripe with opportunity right there, and you should just make a line right there. That if there is any talk or anything about sexual abuse in that family, do not leave your children unsupervised.
There is resistance. And there is a certain amount of shaming
there is.
for me that my own grandmother, God bless her little sweet 94-year-old heart. She says, you carry a grudge, you hold a grudge, you need to just be forgiving. You say you're a Christian, you say you forgive. You know what? He's changed. He made me waffles this morning. Well, bless his heart. And I'm not going to argue with my 94-year-old grandmother who got her waffles this morning. But at the same time, the answer's still no.
Yeah, I think it's a good light.
It is what it is. What do parents need to know about grooming?
Yeah, it's really important. It's really, really important. So, I mean, I'm sure in your book you'll write a bit about the grooming process.
Oh yes,
and
I've got a lot of that written.
Yeah, I mean, psychologically speaking, it's it just is a lure, into kids, and so it's important to know that if something doesn't feel right and your child is being favored by somebody that just doesn't feel right, they are probably being groomed.
And you're talking about the parent not feeling right, because the child is feeling right.
Yeah, for the child it feels wonderful.
Child is feeling great.
Yeah, it feels wonderful.
Yeah.
And so eventually, if it goes through the whole process, the person grooming, brings them in, starts to build trust, which feels great to the child. And eventually what will happen is a rift then is placed between the parent and the child because of the grooming process.
Right.
When that starts happening, it just doesn't matter. Intervene and take away and then go build on building trust, no matter what your child says.
Right.
In that moment, the child might be angry at you because they felt great being groomed. They don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times parents will be like, well, she said this, but it's because he or she is in the middle of a psychological process that is part of the abuse. It's where the abuse starts.
But kids are so little, even 12 and 13 and 14 and year old kids cannot wrap their minds around it, and they say, you don't understand. I am the safest I've ever been with this person. And then there's seeds of doubt that are it is so insidious. It is so evil.
It is. It's really evil because what it's doing actually, I mean, kids are wired to want to trust the adults in their life, the people whose brains are fully developed.
Right.
It feels good. And so when someone comes in and manipulates that,
Yes.
it is hurting kids on the deepest of levels. And that's why I
Right.
say once you know it's there, it's gone too far, intervene immediately, get your kid out and go through the healing process.
Right.
Because the abuse has actually already happened on a psychological level,
On a
even if they've
psychological
never
level.
been touched. But the end result really could be being abused and molested.
What I tell people now, and basically is I would walk up to any person who cares for my child or who's involved with my child, and I would say something to the effect of, so I really have no reason to think that my child is in any danger, but I just have this conversation with every single person that we talk openly. We have very close relationships in our family. We're very open with one another. We have taught our children that their bodies are their own. We have talked to them at great length about good touch and bad touch, and their sense of privacy and all of that. Basically, long story short, is if we ever find out that our child has been harmed in any way, we will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law.
Just that is so
Just
protective.
that.
Yeah.
It makes someone think
They're
twice.
going to be like, I'm not seeing a way. Yeah.
Right, because...
And these are conversations that you really could have, and really, if these are good people, you shouldn't even feel embarrassed about bringing
Oh
up
my
with youth
goodness.
pastors, Sunday school teachers,
Absolutely.
with mentors, with everyone. You
Coaches
should,
and
if someone walked up to
counselors
me and said that,
and
I'd say,
directors
yep,
and
everyone.
and whoever. It doesn't. It's there's so many. Your teachers, oof.
Yep.
Yeah, I have no problem doing that because I'm the crazy one.
Yep.
So, in your practice, how many people do you serve, your clientele, who come to you because you're an incredible hope giver. I just, what you do is so important. How many of your clients would you say have God issues because of their abuse?
Yeah, that's a great one. 100% of my clients do.
100%.
100%, and because there's different realms of it. Now, I don't know if that's true of all people who go through trauma. I don't think it is, but I tend to work with more complex trauma, which goes deep into your beliefs of the world and stuff. And many of my the people that come to see me have experience in a religious community that were not supportive, unfortunately. And that's not all religious communities are unsupportive. but that's who's coming to me. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple factors at play there. One is just the trauma in and of itself
Mm-hmm.
draws you to question everything. And so if you've learned that there's a God who is all powerful and all protecting, and then you were rendered powerless, then in the end you're going to question some things. That's what I see a lot. So and typically it's an internalized thing, which is I'm outside the realm of God's protection.
Right.
He is all protecting, and I'm just not good enough. I'm
Right.
not worthy enough. I was not the one he could protect.
Right.
And so that's one on a deep level.
Yes, that's very, very debilitating
It is. Yeah.
and heart-wrenching.
Yes.
Because protection and love and mercy and grace are for other people
Right. Yeah.
and never for you.
Yeah.
I so have been down that road for
Yes,
sure.
your story
Wrote a
is
whole
like-
book about it.
Yeah, your story
Yeah.
is all about that. So, and I see that in so many. The other one, I do see some, but usually it's not till we've done some work, anger at God.
Sure.
But usually if we've gotten to there, I know we've got some hope because we're finding power again, and God can handle anger. So
Oh yes,
we
yes,
can
yes,
we
yes.
can figure that out. But the other place of God, sort of God issues come up with the church's response. So many have been abused in the church, and not, and of course then that has amazing implications to their spiritual development for ongoing.
For sure.
Or the other one is how the church just responds to help. This is such an unspoken. We don't talk about sex. Even if we validate it, we don't talk about it for long. And so if someone turns to the church in this, because at least these churches that my clients have come from don't know how to help. They say blanket statements, or they don't have a group. They don't have anything there. They might say Jesus will heal you, which that's possibly true, but it's not the end all go all answer, which leaves them more alone. And so then they maybe feel like they can't turn towards the church, and that impacts their relationship with God. So this conversation is pretty common in my office.
Right. I can remember being told, God watches over us, and I internalized that. So basically, God saw everything that was going on, and he just watched. Really? Couldn't point your finger and, strike a lightning bolt up his butt, and or something. You couldn't strike him dead so basically, just like some people, and my church didn't know, and so I didn't have that betrayal of the church. For me, my youth group was my sanctuary.
Yeah.
And so I had a very positive experience growing up with the church, because they just didn't know. Now, if I had said something and they didn't support me, I don't know what would have happened, but I don't have that. But just like, my mother's husband was he was such a betrayal. It was such a betrayal to me. The very person who should have protected me. I just projected that onto God, and said, you either can't save me, rescue me, or you won't. And one is inept and unable, and the other is unthinkable. That because you're complicit too.
Right.
Lots to work out, and I think it's I am a different kind of church lady, but it's just incredible. And right now with MSU and the Olympic gymnastics, and all of that, it's so many places.
Yeah. If systemically,
Yes.
if the church were to catch on to this, which I know that many of them are, this is almost, you can't avoid it these days.
You have to address
and your
this.
message, of course, is about that. But systemically, if a church were to really get behind this and come to understand this, some healing from a God perspective, from people's relationship with God, would be
People who have
tremendously
left
better.
their faith because of this.
Yes.
I
absolutely.
can't tell you how many people I've talked to who say, I will never go to church ever again.
Yeah, me too. I hear that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I want to kind of change directions here,
Okay.
because there's a chapter in my book called Bullying.
Yes.
No extra charge for the extra chapter, because it really has such a negative impact. And we have children who are suicidal at very young ages because they think that the here and now is all there is, and it's all that will ever be. And I know that when I address bullying as a teacher, I attack bullying on two fronts. The first thing I want to do is just shut that bully down. I just want to address that issue and say, and I've gone to bullies and I've said, or children who, I don't want to label, but children who have been the bully or the aggressor in a social situation and has a target on another child who there is a power differential, smaller, weaker, younger. And I say, this ends today. And your entire relationship with that person is different. Because now you are in charge of that person's safety and well-being. Period. You need to absolutely pray to whoever it is you pray to, or light a candle, or do whatever it is you do, okay, for that person's general health and well-being. Because if they so much as break a nail or catch a cold, I am coming back to you and we are going to have another conversation. Do you understand me?
Yeah, that's good.
If for any reason I hear that you have said you're a snitch, or called them names, or you told, or you tattled, or had someone else. So even if someone else, if I find that if I follow the line back to you, we're going to have a problem, because here are the statutes for the state of Idaho.
That's great. Yeah.
And this person has the right to come to school and be safe and be free from any sort of threat or fear. So your relationship has now changed.
That's perfect.
And that's I'm very I don't do this, and because some people say that bullies bully because they've been bullied. I think that that's true for some people, and for other people, they bully other people because they just really love the feeling of power that they get, and if they haven't been bullied, they just like being powerful. Makes them feel good, and so whatever that is. And sometimes I tell kids who are being bullied, well, you might want to ask them, this really, however you answer this question, will determine what I do next. So I just want to know why you're a bully. Are you bullied? Have you been bullied? Or are you just really getting off on this whole power trip? Because if you've been bullied, like, I can help you. But if you're just being a jerk, then I'll just report you right now. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
I mean, what about that? So that's on one front, shut down the bully. But the other, I really want to build resilience in that victim of bullying. I really want to look them in the eyes and say, this is not right by a long way, what is happening to you. And first, I want to tell you is I am so sorry that you have now joined the rest of the human race, who is, because this is something that has happened to every single one of us. And so this is now your situation. I just want to tell them that they are fantastic, that they are not guilty of whatever the person has accused them of. It's just, if it wasn't your hair, it would be your shoes. If it weren't your shoes, it would be this. So just out of nowhere. It's out of left field. They just pick something. And building that resilience and ask them, okay, even if this person doesn't bully you, again, because I've had a talk with them and they might not ever bother you again. Someone else will come along. What can we do? What do you think you can do? Have them come up with solutions, that kind of stuff. So on two fronts.
Yeah.
So I how would you encourage parents and teachers, if there's anything I left out or was wrong about something, please let me know.
I love your response.
What would you suggest? What are your...
So we'll start with mostly from the victim of the bully perspective, and we need to do a lot more to protect our victims and keep them safe.
Systemically.
And
person to person, just one-on-one and systemically.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's really important to understand that anyone who's been, the victim of anything really, but in bullying is left in a powerless position and has lost their voice in some way.
Yes, they have.
That's what makes bullying so bad, so hard. And so the first thing is to believe them, to surround them, to hear their words. Don't well, maybe if you stood up for yourself more, take all of that out of the conversation.
Right.
They actually just need a second of feeling bad here, and you need to be there, right there with them. I also think within the school system and any interviewing system, we need to remember that that power dynamic just happened, and they're going to need support system there. If their parent is around and available, they need to be part of there. Someone needs to be hugging and taking care of them and believed. So that's one important thing. And then when you brought up something really important, that is the shared humanity part of it. They're not alone.
Right.
We share stories of being bullied so that it becomes a strength of resilience to come through. And then of course building up anything that was brought down, just like what you said.
Right.
I think that's
Right.
the most important thing. But it's so important to call this what it is when we're doing it and shut it down and get bullies away. And then I have compassion for bullies, not from, they need help too. So, go get them some help, but there needs to be some quick action to make it stop.
Yeah. Whenever this has happened, and in 26 years I have addressed, I don't even know how many situations like these, because I will address it. I'm not that, I am not dismissive of this. You know why? Kids kill themselves.
They do. It's meaningless. Yeah, we have to.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that I find problematic in the systemic addressing of these things, because a bully will also say, well, they said this to me, and they did this to me, and so they want to very quickly posture themselves as the victim, so that because it's a manipulation and they're trying not to get in trouble. And so it's really dicey, and especially when there doesn't seem to be a power differential. It's just one person and they're kind of on an equal playing field sometimes. But it's, what was in response to what, and how did this go down? I mean, there was a situation, and I will not say when or where in my career, but there were 3 boys who were very big boys who were picking on a girl that was very small. So we have the gender, we have the number, we have the size, we have the strength, we have the ferocity, and this little girl came out dropping F-bombs like a trucker. God bless her. And absolutely calling them every name in the book, and trying to be as big as she could. And it was a situation where everybody involved was just talked to, because it was a 50-50 situation, and she gave just like she got. And I was infuriated.
Yeah, you should have been. Yeah, that's...
Absolutely infuriated. I would come out kicking and screaming and dropping F-bombs too, because it's survival. She did. If she hadn't, God knows what would have happened to her. At least she stood up for herself enough to give them pause.
Yeah, very protective. She did it. Yeah. And so she shouldn't have been punished.
And she should not have been punished for that.
Nope.
And they barely got off with nothing.
Oh my goodness.
Because she was instigating. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that has to go. That mindset has to go.
That mindset has to go. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Just a couple more things.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah,
it's
great.
been so good.
Yeah, it
to
is great. I
Well,
love
and
talking
we
with
have
you.
to just get together more because
Mhm.
I just love you, and we're both so busy.
Yeah, it's just too busy.
I know. So we come together for work. I am the hope girl.
Yeah, you are.
I've written about it and I believe in it, and the fact that I even have it is a miracle because of so much and copious amounts of therapy. But how do you help people find hope again?
Yeah, honestly, it's a counterintuitive answer. I help people, and just because of what I do, find hope by sitting in their hopelessness with them.
Yeah.
You know,
But that's my whole book.
yeah.
You sit with people in their pain.
Yeah, with that, and
For as long as it
yeah,
takes.
there's just I think we're wired for connection, and so when we go into that place where most people are too afraid to go, and we sit there, it all immediately awakens something that can then continue to grow, and people find hope. I mean, there's much more to that, in that, but that's it. The simple answer is sit with them.
You want to talk about counterintuitive. Chasing the American dream is the polar opposite of what you just said.
That's right.
Pursuing my life, my liberty, my happiness, my success. We measure that with money. We measure that with power, with comfort.
Yes.
And we gravitate toward our own comfort.
Yes.
So, like 24, I mean, that is the point. That is the point of living, is to be comfortable. And so what we suggest, what is the opposite, is that you sit with people in their suffering, and you do so deliberately. On purpose, intentionally, for as long as it takes. And people say, well, how do you do that? And for me, and I don't want to be preachy and tell people this is what you have to do. I'm just saying, here's how I manage to do it, is because I believe in resurrection. And so dying sucks. Nobody's saying it doesn't. Suffering sucks. Nobody's here to argue. But you know what? You can go into that situation with faith, with confidence, knowing that you're going to die with someone in their suffering and hold them. And you can reach into your own chest and pull out your beating heart and put it in someone else. That's no big deal, because you can be resurrected. You have come back from trauma. You have come back from it. And you share in that, and time again. There's a show on, it's, goodness, what is it called? It's these girls who have escaped from the FLDS church, escaping polygamy is what it's called. And they are the quintessential hope givers. I only saw maybe 4 or 5 shows, and I DVR'd them. They are exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about you have come out of the darkness, and you can go back in time and time and time again. Is it dangerous? Yes. Could you get hurt? Yes. Could you lose? Yes.
And do it anyway.
And you do it anyway, because you've been hurt and lost and all of that before. So we're just another run around the block. And they will pull people out. And they'll go in again and again and again and rescue, rescue, rescue. That's a hope giver.
It is, yeah. And
That's a hope
when we're
giver.
talking about this, sitting with that, the thing is none of us is exempt from this.
No.
When we're sitting with someone else's suffering, it's ours. I mean, we all have that same thing. We like to pretend we didn't.
Right.
We like to create a life that shows proofs, but none of us are exempt, and probably all of us have experienced suffering in some form. And so when we're sitting with someone, we're sitting with ourselves, we're sitting with everyone. So this is the most human thing we can do, is sit with one another in suffering. The most human thing. And the most divine thing.
It is absolutely divine. It is absolutely divine. And again, so contrary to how we are socialized in this country. I think one of the things that we do not embrace in a very healthy way is sacrifice. We don't sacrifice. I mean, I see people all around me fighting for rights that they're not being stripped of.
Right, yes, yes, I understand.
No one says you can't do this, like, no one's trying to take away anything. And yet, there are so many people majoring on the minors, and I'm going to have a chapter called The Great Distraction.
Yes, that's a great...
It's the great distraction. If people would put as much energy into eradicating hunger, eradicating poverty, eradicating war. War is bad.
Yes, yes.
War is bad. Syria, an entire generation of children are not being educated. If people would take the energy that they spend on trying to legislate this, that, and the other, on eradicating child sexual abuse from the face of the planet, it would be powerful.
It would be.
It would be powerful.
Yeah, it would
and
have such an impact for every generation. Yep.
That's why I'm trying to recruit hope givers. Really quickly, tell us what the best resources that you have found for parents.
Yeah, so I really think in terms of starting from the beginning and sort of trauma-proofing our kids is actually some really great books that I would recommend. So.
Okay.
I would recommend The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel. It talks about starting to teach these things from the very beginning.
Wonderful.
And he's a neurologist or neuroscientist, so he uses that perspective. But it's all for parents. He wrote it with other parents. It's really great. And there's a book called Trauma Proofing Your Kids by Peter Levine. So that would be a really good one, I think, to look into. And then I really think creating... in terms of what I see helps families the most is creating communities that make this conversation okay.
Yes.
And that actually is the most helpful that I've seen ever handing a book to or anything like that.
Because it's kinesthetic, it's hands-on.
Yep.
That is so great. I would also add the Darkness to Light organization. In all the years I've been doing advocacy work, they are my go-to website. So it's the letter D for darkness, the number 2, an L for light.org. D2L.org.
That's awesome.
It is fantastic. And then you are also available to help, and when your workload becomes such that you need to refer, then you can do that as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Janelle Stauffer, she is a hope giver, she is a trauma therapist, and she is my good friend. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Daisy. Thank you.
I just appreciate you.
Thank you very much.